You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 612, our continuing Spotlight character episodes for the Andor series. So even though the series is now behind us, so by the better part of about 2 months now, about a month and a half, we are still spending time because we really wanted to come back and revisit the characters. We've already done one with Luthen and Clea. Tonight, we are going to be tackling arguably the most romantic couple in Star Wars, and that is Syril and Dedra. So to help me do that is, of course, Jonesy, who's with me. Jonesy, welcome to the show. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. It is absolutely a couple of the year. I think hands down, couple of the year. No matter what franchise you're a part of, they can all step aside for Syril and Dedra.
Yeah, I mean, love knows no bounds when it comes to them, and we're going to get to all of that here tonight. But yeah, before we get started, though, how about some quick shout outs and thank yous to some very special folks?
Yeah, thanks to all of our Patreon members, especially our now part of the tribe members: Alex, Danny, Mike, Lauren, Dante, Riss, Jackson, Sharkman, Dan, Daz, Uncle Leon, Josh, Jacob Reed Reborn, and I've got a Brad feeling. And our Delusion of Grandeur members, our top tier. Now, this is Rod Racing, CJ, Steve, and Rob. If you are curious about Patreon, cantinacast.com/Patreon. We'd love for you to join. Albert's got it there on the screen. You'll find links everywhere. cantinacast.com/Patreon if you'd like to join. We have a tier for everybody: audio, video, exclusive content just for y'all. So thank y'all so much for coming out.
And if you're joining us on the live stream tonight, thank you for being here. You guys can also follow us on cantinacast.com/YouTube. We've got a ton of videos out there. This one obviously as well. But then you also get access to Jedi Novel Archive, which is Lauren's bit of the show where she covers all of the books. She's got something coming up here on the main show. Now, we'll talk about that in just one second. But yeah, lots and lots of content out there as well. So please, if you're not following the channel, please like the channel or like this video, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell so you get the alerts anytime we go live, or once Lauren posts any of her videos on the books, you'll get all that stuff exclusively and right away to you.
Yeah, so much great feedback on her Trials of the Jedi coverage. It's really amazing to see all of that. And she's excited for the High Republic to end because now it means that she can branch out to some of the other Star Wars content, as well as for all of you Legends fans out there to be able to continue to go back and revisit some of these Legends materials that they're getting re-released now, so that she's really enjoyed some of it. So she's excited to go back to some of that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that it's really exciting to see all of the amazing feedback though for Trials of the Jedi. It's a really great, great piece. She did a great job and it's a great book. So well deserved for sure. So let's see show notes, or I guess programming notes. We've got I'll let you take the first one. You guys have a show coming up here Sunday, you and Lauren. What's going on there? Yeah, Sunday at 7 p.m. Central, Lauren and I are going to cover The Witness, which is a short story from a certain point of view, for The Empire Strikes Back, a book by Adam Christopher. So a little bit of celebrating the anticipated Master of Evil from Adam Christopher. Maybe not totally related, but maybe somewhat related. But again, another fun short story. Chance to get Lauren here on the main show with us. So it would be a lot of fun. So 7 p.m. on Sunday, Lauren's going to join me on that one.
Yeah, it's definitely blood related simply because they have the same father in Adam Christopher. Great guy. We have an episode with where we did an interview with him, which you haven't
only on Patreon. Go check that out.
Yeah, it's only on Patreon. And then next Wednesday, we're going to come back and do yet another character spotlight episode, and that's going to be on the woman herself, arguably, probably hands down, Woman of the Year, Mon Mothma. So that'll be fun to get in the head of her and talk about her growth in season 2.
You mispronounced Edie.
Right. That'll be the Patreon exclusive episode.
She's Mom of the Year. My bad.
Yeah, Mother of the Year. That's a 2 a.m. recording. So if you want to join us live for that one, that's when we're doing that one. So a lot of good stuff here still coming up, and we're going to continue the Andor love with the character spotlight episodes even after this. So stay tuned for more on that one. All right. Let's get into our main topic tonight. Let's talk about Syril and Dedra. And so this one's a little different. I was trying to figure out how do we kind of format the show. I thought we'd just start with talking about them as a couple, and then we can talk about Syril and kind of end on Dedra, since she outlasted him for how long we can debate a little bit later. But I guess let's start with the performances themselves. I mean, you've got I was going to call him Syril Karn, Kyle Soller playing Syril Karn, and of course you've got Denise Go playing Dedra Meero, and both of them really knocked it out of the park in both season 1 and season 2. It felt like during season 1 it was kind of a showcase for Kyle and Syril, and then Dedra kind of took the more of the spotlight in season 2, arguably because of how things went with the storyline and all. But both of them were just phenomenal. And I was looking at some of the interviews that they had done post Andor season 2, and they, in several interviews, they talked about how much they really enjoyed working with each other. They were able to work with each other really well. They kicked it off. They had a good energy. They just collaborated very well. So all of that kind of, made its way onto the screen, in addition to the solid, incredible storytelling, writing, the directing, everything. It was just a really great couple there off screen, if you will.
Yeah, what's interesting about Kyle Soller's performance in particular is that he had to play the character so dry. I mean, Syril Karn really doesn't have, he's not a super dynamic character and like getting excitable or heroic or really getting the, whatever it is you want to quantify with him. He's just like this really, really mundane kind of guy, but there's this passion that is always simmering below the surface, and that he's able to get some of that out from time to time in a very deliberate way. Like, it's really a testament to Kyle Soller and then the performance there. And like I said, with Denise Goff, I mean, she had so much to play with, I think, with this character, especially the arc from season 1 into season 2 and where she ultimately ended up, that it was just a playground for her. But I'm with you, man. The interviews, like both during the press junket and afterwards, they just have so much chemistry, and they're so unlike their characters, but that chemistry and that bond that they have off screen is really palpable too. And I think that's what makes these characters work so well. And it's almost odd that they were able to get such awkward moments in the show, like when you see them off stage, like that they look so awkward on stage, but then they just have such such dynamic chemistry off. Yeah, very comfortable with each other. Just a lot of fun between them, right? And you just kind of see how they take the craft. But it was just a lot of fun to watch them, both on and off screen. They both just did an amazing job.
So focusing on the characters themselves, I think it was, we had assumptions that this was going to turn into some kind of a weird romantic relationship coming out of season 1. I think some of us were praying for it. Others were dreading it. And I think by and large, what we got, whether you liked it or not, I think it was very
appropriate. Yeah.
Very appropriate. And I was going to say it was enjoyable, right? In probably the wrong and worst ways you can possibly think of, but it was definitely entertaining for lack of a better term. But there's a lot of similarities between the two characters, right? Even though they feel like they're in some ways very opposite of each other, yet what grounds both of them is just kind of that sheer determination for like career success, right? We saw that in season 1 with Syril's character. We see it in season 2 as she's kind of rising up through the ranks of the ISB. There are very, very stark contrasts to, let's say, Cassian and Bix in terms of the relationship. You've got, we're going to get into all those details here in just one second. And I also thought about their character couples, like they're almost foils to Andor and Luthen in some ways, right? Because you've got Dedra, who's after Luthen, and you've got Syril, who's been after Cassian. And so they're both kind of working together on opposite sides, and they're kind of going in very different directions, of course, but it's a very dynamic group, couple, in addition to their characters themselves, which are very complex. Like I said, we'll get into that in just a second. But what are some of the other, I guess, any other similarities or anything else that you noticed about them that were, similarities, I guess, between the two characters?
No, I think those were some of the main ones. Well, I think we'll talk through some of them as we kind of go through the breakdown tonight. But yeah, I think we're going to come across as we go. So I'll save them for as we go.
Well, what about their connectedness? Because I don't know, like I said, in some ways it feels like opposites attract, but they're not. I mean, we just talked about how there are things in common.
It goes to what they want out of the relationship or what they want out of life, right? And this is some of the things that we'll talk about, I think, is going to be that, Dedra Meero is very focused on her career and what she wants, and she'll kind of use whatever tools are at her disposal to get what she wants for really her own improvement. And where Syril fits into that is kind of interesting because she can't seem to quite to figure it out a little bit. You can't tell if she's actually serious about the relationship or not, or if it's just a tool to an end for her. And you kind of think that it might just be a tool for an end for her, but there's a little something there that's like, okay, it's not so bad having a partner. Whereas I think with Syril, it's very much like you could just tell all the things he wants in life, right? The relationship with his mother, he needs validation. The greatest moment in his life is whenever he gets praise from Partagaz, and so all of these moments of him, it's this sense of accomplishment, but he's driven because he truly believes in something though too,
right?
And it's bigger than himself, and that's with catching Andor, he believes that it's a threat to what he believes is the best environment, right? The Imperial, establishment of sorts. So it's interesting, like you said, they have kind of parallels that they move in the same direction for the Empire, but they do it for very different reasons. And you almost look at Dedra as like the traditional Imperial officer that we grew up with, like with the Moffs. They're always bickering. They're always, they're always fighting and kind of hand fighting over this territory, that territory. She really fits that mold through and through, where Syril is much more about actually kind of believes in the message overall.
Yeah. I've got that in my notes as well, because there are moments in there where you look at Syril and he's longing for the life, that Dedra has. That's what he's trying to get to. And she's born into it, right? She kind of grew up in the system, went through the ranks, still struggling to get through the ranks, but he looks at the Empire. I mean, he is by and large the biggest fanboy. I mean, hell, he had even those little stormtrooper action figures, in his apartment as an older man. Not to say I've got them too. I'm just saying, not throwing slack at him or anything, but that says a lot about his aspirations. And so he kind of sees her as just, this goddess of the Empire that he's worshipped, right? He wants to be part of that order. Now that all comes crashing down later down the road when he realizes, they're about the worst thing in the entire world.
But there's always this sense of wanting to prove himself though too. He's just been beaten down in life so much that you can just tell he just wants some sort of recognition. Like, can you please just recognize me? Could you see me as someone who brings value? Because he just feels like a deadbeat, I think, most of the time, despite being fairly competent, right? I mean, we talked about this in some of the breakdowns. He's actually fairly competent with what he's addressing, the things that he's seeing, his investigations and his investigative abilities are pretty good. So, I mean, he's doing all of these things, and he could clearly build trust and build relationships with what we saw in Gorman as well. So, he's got the chops in some kind of way. It's just it's interesting how they don't ever respect him in any kind of way. And that's really the one thing he wants at the end of the day, is just a little bit of respect.
Yeah. I kind of landed, I think, after the series was over. I know we talked about this as we were breaking down episodes, and they had those moments where you brought her up, the question about whether or not she was in love with him or had any kind of, affection outside of just using him as a tool. I think I've finally landed on that. No, I don't know that she did. I mean, I think there was some kind of primal, right, relationship aspect that existed. Yeah. He was a warm body. He satisfied her in bed or whatever it was they were doing. But even that was just kind of like checking the box, right? She needed it, but it could have been anybody, really. It just happened to be.
They just stood awkwardly in the dark. They didn't actually do anything.
I think they probably did do something, but I mean, it's probably more. It's probably, it wouldn't be beyond the realm of possibility that they just stood there in the dark or went to bed in their full clothes or whatever. But but the point is, I think there were moments in there where she probably had, needs that were being fulfilled by him. But I don't, for the life of me, think there was anything romantic about it. It did feel like at the very end, he was just a tool. It's why she was so callous. Maybe at the very end, after he died, she might have felt some remorse for what she did, given the way, because of his fate. I'm not pulling that from anything that was on screen. I'm pulling that directly from something that Denise talked about when we get to her character a little bit later, where, maybe there was some more remorse there. But otherwise, I mean, she was kind of like, she was likable in some sense. It's the craziest thing is, and I know we already were talking about these two characters, but in season 1, you're almost kind of rooting for her. You know what I mean? Like we were seeing this woman that was in this male dominant, environment, and horrible people at that. And she was struggling to just make a name for herself and get the respect that she was due. And, you almost rooted for her. And then by the time we get to season 2, you're like, wow, I can't, I don't think I hated her, but she wasn't a nice person at all. I mean, she was pretty rotten and awful at the end.
Oh, she's an absolutely terrible, trash human being. Yeah. Without fail.
Yeah.
Which I think is what made her so interesting, I think, in some way too. like someone just willing to commit so hard and just keep committing, even though you could tell that everything is just slipping through her fingers. I think it's kind of an epitome for the, or kind of an analogy for the Empire in some way though too, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's her story.
Yeah. I don't know if we're going to get into a lot of Edie discussion tonight, but I'd throw it in here now just because she was kind of an interesting dynamic that came into the relationship halfway through season 2. It was very clear that she wanted to, make sure that Edie knew that she was the powerful one. She was the one in control. Part of that, felt like maybe when I first saw the episode, I was like, oh, she's kind of sticking up for her man. And I thought, well, maybe not. Maybe it was more like, hey, Edie's actually a threat to her, right? Because if she's using Syril to do all this and she's trying to pull Syril back into Coruscant, right? She keeps telling, oh, you need to come back to Coruscant. I told you not to go over there. She might have seen her as a threat, like, hey, you could be screwing up this massive project that we got going on here. She probably knew after, especially that interaction with him and the things that he probably told her, that she has been a very controlling figure in his life throughout all of his life. And so it was probably incumbent upon her to make herself known to Edie that, look, I'm the one in control here. I'm the one, I control your son. You're only allowed to see him when I say you can see him, because you're not going to jeopardize anything there. But that was my take on it. I don't know. What do you think about her?
I took a little bit differently, I guess. I took it as more of, I think Dedra, she viewed Syril as pathetic, I think, in many cases, and that he would just keep getting beat on by his mom. I think at some point she just kind of got fed up with it, and this is where you question whether she actually cared a little bit, because this is where I think that she might have actually cared just a little bit of, like, this guy's he's just in this horrible place, and she's kind of a horrible person. Someone needs to put her in her place. And the reason why I think that is because she did it all without Syril even really knowing. And her drive in those conversations with Edie were more along the lines of, look, he's going to walk away. He's not going to talk to you whatsoever. And to your point, yeah, she's very, Dedra's very much in control here, but she's telling her, like, look, you're not going to have him in your life whatsoever unless you shape up, unless you stop beating on him, unless you stop the emotional abuse and the damage that you keep causing. And if you do that, if you play nice, if you play ball, then I will guarantee that you'll have the relationship that you kind of always wanted. He'll come and visit, he'll call you and whatever. And we see how that made good. We see her make good on that with Syril of saying, hey, you really need to talk to your mom. Yeah, we know she's a little bit tough, but just do it. She's going to be respectful. Like, everything's going to be, fine. And he senses some change in all of that too, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of viewed it more of that angle, but I think it stemmed from, again, that respect or lack of respect, I think, for Syril. Like, he can't take care of himself. He can't stand up for himself, like, in anything except maybe his job, where he's taking all of this risk of standing up for himself and what's right or wrong. And, he's been kind of demoted a couple of times as a result, or at least been looked at a little bit funny by the Empire as a result. But, with dear old mom, he just cowers over and falls down the bed. So,
yeah, right.
Which is still one of the funnier moments in the series, but still, that's kind of how I shaped all that stuff up.
I think
it almost seemed like she cared a little bit, or she just got fed up with it, Dedra. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I can see that. I mean, like I said, it did feel defensive towards him in a lot of ways. But I do want to talk just also, because, again, I don't know that we're going to come back to Edie. We're not going to do a character spotlight at 2 a.m. That's for sure. But I do want to just kind of mention, as far as her character goes, I did feel really bad for her at the very end of that, right? Yeah. It seemed like, I mean, in one aspect, I was kind of laughing inside of my head. In another way, I was kind of really, sympathetic for what she was going through, given, again, she was trying to get her son out of there. She had lost control of her son, even though, it was probably, maybe he was starting to call more and see her more, but that was all because someone else was controlling everything. I mean, she wasn't the best person either. Right. And I've got some, questions about Uncle Harlow and exactly what the hell was going on there with all the shadiness that was going on there. Right. But I did feel bad for her at the very end, especially, if that was how she found out about her son's death, was on television or on, the vids or the feeds. Mm-hmm. It's pretty kind of sad. So, it probably couldn't have happened to a better person, but I'm not that cold.
Well, I think at the end of the day, parents care for their kids, and kids care for their parents, I think, regardless of all of the challenges that they have. And, they were at least on a better path. And which I think you always take heart in, like, okay, they were at least in a better place overall. You're always going to have that tension between mothers and sons and daughters and whatever, or moms and daughters and stuff like that, right? So you're always going to have that tension. So that's just to be expected. But again, you don't expect to lose your kid and to outlive your kid. I think that was probably genuine for her. It wasn't one of those items, kind of the narcissistic moments of where she wants the attention. Like she was probably genuinely heartbroken. I wish it would come through on screen a little bit better. It didn't really come through on screen very well.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like the
emotion.
I was kind of confused what I was supposed to be feeling there in that moment, you know?
Yeah, and that's totally fair, I think, because it just didn't visually look that way. It kind of seemed like it was more of the same Edie, which I would have liked to have seen a little more like the true, like it felt like really genuine, unfettered emotion coming out of I really did lose my boy. I really did love him. All I wanted to do was spend more time with him, kind of thing. And I wanted him to do the things. She just wanted him to do all the things that she thought was best. Mom knows best, right?
Right.
So, and some families have that type of dynamic. It's tough. I mean, so I wish they would have done a little bit better with that, but I think she really did genuinely care. And he did too, I think, too. He called her, even though he'd roll his eyes. He was disciplined with it too. So I think he loves his mom, and he just wanted her to be not so on his ass about everything too.
Yeah. We're going to get into that too in a little bit, because I think that's a reason why he found himself so attracted to somebody like Dedra Meero. But all right, let's talk about Syril Karn and just kind of go over some of his characteristics and then talk about his journey in season 2. We did this with the last couple of characters and talking about character traits, words that we'd use to describe them. It's funny, like I said, a lot of these I would say you could argue that are the same for Dedra as well, but he does definitely come across as somebody who is willing to uphold law and order. Like he felt everything was structured, everything had to be formal, there was a process for everything. He stayed within the boundaries, stayed within the construct. And as a result of that, he's probably been rewarded, because some of this stems from his mother. More on that again later. But then, he was thinking that on what was it? What's the name of the first in episode 1, the town where where they were after Andor.
Oh, in Ferrix?
Oh, no, not Ferrix. Morlana.
Oh, yeah, Morlana. Yeah.
When he was on that planet, he was pretty much following all the guidelines, with the exception of his uniform, right? Because he did the tailoring and all that. But it felt like he was a pretty straight arrow kind of guy. Yeah. By the time we get to season 2, he's got this kind of crap job in the ISB, but he's very proud of what he's doing. He's staying with it. And that's why I think when he gave that little speech to that incoming intern guy, or the person that was going to take over, I think he was very sincere about all of that, right?
He meant every word.
Every word to the T. He meant every single thing that came out of his mouth to that guy, because in his mind, he saw success.
It was still a little self-indulgent, but
it can be both.
But yeah, truly, I think he did really mean it. But it was definitely a puffing your chest out just a little bit of, this is what I did. I made it, kid. So can you?
Right. We talked about him already being, kind of idolizing the Empire. When it comes to, again, just going back to Edie and her influence, if you've ever been to any kind of like personal counseling or even couples counseling, they talk about how a lot of times, not every time, but a lot of times we're attracted to people that remind us of our parents, not physically, I don't mean weirdly or creepily right, or anything like that, but the character traits, right? And for all the good traits that we look for in a partner that come from our parents, we also are attracted to all the bad traits as well sometimes. And you can see that, I think, in Syril Karn. That's why he was so, obsessed with, or infatuated, mentally invested in Dedra, because she was so controlling. She had that power. It reminded him a lot of his mother in some ways, in addition to all the good stuff. And so that's kind of why he was I felt like that's why he was idolizing her. That's why he was so infatuated with her. That's why he really wanted to have this life with her, and was probably not on the same page at all, right? He was thinking, oh man, this is going places, and she would shut that down, right? And suddenly he'd have to recoil and have to come back and realize, okay, now what do I do here? It felt like he was always struggling. He was always grasping. He was the one that was always chasing her, whereas she was just, again, in control and using him. Because that's kind of how he grew up, right? He kind of grew up in that same way with his mother in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think he also saw in Dedra as someone who was successful in the way that he wanted to be as well.
Yeah.
But he saw that she was achieving the goals that he felt like he was capable of doing too. And not to ride her coattails or anything like that, but generally that she was a path to be able to do that. And he was attracted to strength and that discipline and again, she embodied what the Empire should be and could be, right? And so that was very attractive to him. And I think someone also that would combat his mother's perspective there too, I think also is something else that we kind of look for in partners sometimes, where we're looking for someone like, hey, I've lived this way for so long, I need to break from that. Who's going to help me break from that, right? Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing in the long run remains to be seen, but you kind of look for someone that helps you kind of differ from that, even though you're actually gravitating towards many of the same traits that maybe you don't like in them, but you're overseeing it because you see all the things that you do want and you do like from that person. But yeah, but it's interesting that she kind of embodied his perfect view of what an Imperial officer could be and what he could actually become in some kind of way too, I think.
What are some of the other traits, I guess, for you, or either traits or words to describe Syril Karn?
Yeah, I mean, I used some of them earlier, like, super competent, and there's a certain confidence that goes with him too, I think, as well. Persistent, and I think, but there's also some of those negative words too, a bit pathetic, right? And a little bit weak in some areas too, and willing to he gets overridden quite a bit too. And, the relationship with his mom in particular, I think is part of that. But I think there's a certain ambition that underpins it all, right? And it's kind of a very subtle ambition most of the time, even though it does come out. I think it came out really quite a bit in season 1, but you see it throughout season 2 too. It's like you just have this motivation behind him that really does want to get involved. He wants to do something meaningful. He just wants to have something. He wants his life to mean something, right? And so I think that's the undercurrent there. That's just the baseline for him of everything that's driving every decision he makes, because he doesn't want some Uncle Harlow under the table job where he's just working for somebody else. He wants something that he truly, well, he's still working for somebody else, but he's at least truly passionate about it and wants to apply that passion in some kind of way. And I think at the end of the day, really be useful. And again, longing, I think, is another word I would use for that respect from somebody, and validate that he is competent and successful in all those positive attributes that he would equate to himself.
In some of the interviews after the season was over, after season 2, Gilroy was talking about the character, and he did say that Syril Karn was kind of the hero of his own story. He saw himself as the hero of his own story, that everybody else was the bad guy and he was the good guy, which, is always the case for every villain. They think they're in the right and they're doing the right thing. But you can definitely see that. There's great examples of that throughout his character, both in season 1 and season 2. You brought up the looking at Dedra for power. I had that in my notes as well, because again, it just seemed like that was everything that he'd been aspiring to do. And that's why he felt so relieved, and it felt like he was on the right track once he got that job. Because at that point, he was working for the ISB, but he was on his way up. He got to play a spy, right? He was almost, again, romanticizing what this all was going to be like, all this power and the glory and the fame and people getting to know, trying to make a name for himself, right? He felt like he was on that path, which hits even harder when you think about it from that perspective. When we get to the very end, when he dies and Andor says, "Who are you?" Right? He's at that point thinking everybody should know who I am. I'm the guy. I'm the one that's doing all this. Here's the thing too. I wouldn't say he was a great spy. Like, we talked about him being a very good police officer and all that stuff, but I think he slipped up, and we don't have a lot of context here because of the rapid acceleration of time that was going by in season 2. But it did feel like he did started to slip up because of his kind of sympathy or empathy towards the Gormans and kind of their plight and what they were up against. And we saw some of that manifest in that final episode before he died. But he was definitely someone who was out there trying to make a name for himself, finally got in. And why he didn't want to go to Coruscant was because he was on that path. It was him and her together. They were going to make it. And again, all of that comes crashing down when he realizes he's been used at the very end. Yeah. But it's hard not to sympathize for that character and just feel sorry for him at the end of the day. Unlike Dedra, I don't really have any sympathy whatsoever for her. He was a character that I felt like, wow, that's pretty sad in retrospect now, given what he'd been through.
Yeah, when you have someone that's just kind of doing their job and they don't, it's hard to totally sympathize with them because they have the blinders on at the same time. Mm-hmm. They refuse to see anything outside of their purview. I think to your point, maybe he started, this is kind of the debate too, of did he see the evilness of the Empire at the end of the day? Or did he see the evilness of the Empire in the people that are running the Empire? And that's truly what it embodies. And he just never saw that. And he felt just like a fool at the end of the day of saying, I can't believe that I missed not only this person who's been using me to further her own agenda, and she's hidden all of this stuff from me and these horrible atrocities, but there's all these horrible atrocities that we're actually doing, that this is the actual plan, is to do some of this. You just kind of wonder if he truly never saw it or truly never thought the Empire was capable of those types of activities, or if he was just was he naive or is he delusional, and which one is the character? And I think that's a bit of an interesting conversation, because I don't think the actors will give you a good idea either way too, because you kind of feel like it's a little of both in some ways. And sometimes just naivete of what he thinks is right or wrong. And then sometimes he just refuses to look at any of the evidence for all the competencies that he has. He refused to see what's actually going on until the very, very end for him. And what ends up being too late on Gorman.
Yeah. I think his journey, let's talk about Gorman, and I want to bring in kind of Enza's role in this as well. But yeah, I mean, you're right. Like he definitely was someone who was willing to help the Empire for his own personal gain and power, right? He saw that as a kind of a career path. He was never told why they were on Gorman, right? He was never in the know as to why they were there and what they were trying to do. And I think you're right. At least my take was at the very end there, when he's just standing there stunned, and we get that kind of slow motion camera and everything, chaos has erupted everywhere all around him. And he's absolutely shell shocked. He has no idea what to do, because I think it's all coming in. It's all crashing. His eyes are suddenly wide open now about, I've actually been a part of all of this. Right. Yeah. And thinking I was doing the right thing, thinking that I was working for the right people, and we were in this to kind of stop this rebellion that was going to happen. I think as time went on, again, this is stuff probably that happened off screen, those kind of cracks started to form in the wall of all that. And so he started to have second guesses. And I think he was in a position of just really not wanting to even see that. Like, I think there were clear signs that something was really, truly not right, but he couldn't face that. He couldn't admit to himself that was the case. And so he was trying to play both rules or both sides, one in turning over the bad guys, but at the same time starting to sympathize with the bad guys in some ways. There was a question that went out there after, again, this is post of the season 2. They asked Kyle Soller if his character had any kind of relationship with Enza, because that in that one scene she slaps him, and you realize there's something going on there. I think the definitive answer, at least the way it was given by Kyle Soller, was that no, they didn't necessarily have like a romantic relationship. He did say that he did have a relationship with her father. And what was that guy's name? I didn't write that. I forgot his name already, but
right.
There was a relationship that existed with him almost as a father and son. That's what Gilroy said was going to happen. And of course we don't get all that, and that makes sense because, his father died really young. He had a father figure in that person. Through that course, either he may have saw her as a sister, but he could have also been on that verge of being like, hey, I could romantically be involved with this person. They were at least close enough where she felt it would not be out of line just to slap him right there in front of, for what happened. And he certainly didn't strike back. So there's something that was going on. There was definitely some kind of a for lack of a better word, platonic relationship, but almost, familial in some way because of that relationship with the father.
Yeah, they built a certain level of trust, right? That clearly the slap indicates the betrayal of that trust, that he had brought this on them in some way, or at least contributed to it significantly by helping organize them and feeding information back. All the chips are on the table. And again, I think it's interesting, like you were saying, he's like having these moments of realization. He's the blinders are kind of coming off. He's letting them fall away finally. He's like the racehorse that's finally having it all removed. But then he doubles down on it when he goes after Andor. It's like the one thing I think I could control, because it's not me. It's not what I did. It's not all of this stuff. It's that person right there that is somehow, they're the ones responsible for it at the end of the day. It's pointing the finger and deflecting it all off of himself and kind of doubling down back of saying, well, this is my path out. This is my path. If I just prove this right again, maybe there's a path for me to fix this. That's the delusional part, right? That's the part of fooling himself into thinking that there's a path to righteousness still to fit his narrative when it has been literally blown out of the Gorman, sky and sea and earth and everything.
Yeah. I wonder too, like there's a part of me that thinks that he did kind of see himself as the white knight for Enza as well. Like he was going to save her from what was coming, or at least try to save her and maybe her dad as well. So, and I say that only because like, I feel like he did get caught up in the whole spy thing. I don't know that he was the best at it. He certainly was kind of losing his way. But again, this goes back to, we don't have the benefit of, what transpired in those 2 years, or in that he was on Gorman or whatever it was, to kind of understand the intricacies of the relationships that he had.
I think we see Syril probably believing he's kind of the white knight in a lot of circumstances, right?
Right. Yeah.
Not just maybe the Gormans, but I think, again, when you spend that much time with them, you can't help but have connections, right? This is really difficult for spies to do, from what I've read, of developing close relationships, but keeping barriers up that's not a real relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how you do it. And Syril is not a field op. He's not a field guy. He's not someone they deploy in the field. He's a risk in the field for the most part, but but he was very successful in this way, because I think it is that he does have a way of relating to people in his own way. And I think they saw him as kind of this wayward soul and this person who could be turned, and, someone that they could find hope in as well. Like, hey, if we can convert one person, in the Empire, then maybe there's hope for more of them, right?
Yep. I agree. Let's talk about, I guess another moment here, going back to the relationship. There is that moment where he goes in and he puts his hands around Dedra's throat and doesn't really choke her, but he's certainly angry about everything that's going on. I mean, I think that's when it's starting to kind of really sink in that, holy crap, this is not at all what's going on here. There was another interview that I read, and I don't remember where it was, but I think it was either Gilroy or Kyle were talking about, in that moment, what he was really doing was choking himself out, because at that point he starts to blame himself. Like, how could I have been this dumb? How could I have not seen all of this? And he has no way doesn't know how to release it. Right. And so the only person that's there is the one person that's behind a lot of this, who's betrayed him now at this point. And so it was just kind of like this visceral reaction to just go out and put his hands on her neck, but he doesn't go through with it. I mean, he could have gone through with it. That's just not who he is. He's not a killer. This gets doubled down later on when we see him with Andor, right? He has the opportunity to kill Andor, and yet he doesn't do it. It's just not who he is. He's not a killer. He's, again, everything that we've talked about, just been led down the wrong path, or been, I guess, tricked and fooled and manipulated into doing the Empire's bidding. But he's not the killer. And I think that's why I say, like, I sympathize with him more than even though, he did some bad things. It's hard to say that he was on the bad side of things, even if, his intentions weren't always wholesome, right?
Well, no, I mean, he was definitely on the bad side of things, but his intentions may not have been bad, like, for why he was pursuing them. Yeah. Definitely on the wrong side, though. But yeah, man, this is tough, because when he put his hand around Dedra's throat, you could almost feel like it was just all that frustration and anxiety. It could have been his mother in front of him. It could have been Dedra. It could have been himself. It was just all of that anxiety, all of that stress, all of that pain, all of that frustration finally just bubbling out of, and I think a lot of it stems back to, is that self-realization. Like, I keep letting this happen to myself. Like, why do I keep letting these people do these things to me? And what am I going to do about it? But like you said the other day, he's still, backs down from kind of taking control of the situation or doing something about it. Not that I'm advocating him, choking her out or anything like that, but he still backs off on, like, crossing that line, because, like you said, he's not a killer. He's a desk jockey. He's smart, but he's not a field op. He's not one of these guys that's going to get out there and make the world a different place than behind the scenes in the sexy spy life. But
right,
but finally he's just, I think, had enough, and like you said, now he's just lost. So what he's done, but he does have the power to walk away from Dedra and basically say, "Don't ever call me again. Like, delete my number from your phone. Never. We're like, this is over. We're done." And you kind of question how much it seemed like it affected her in some way, at least. But for him, it was a really big moment of, like, making the decision to walk away from somebody that has continued to kind of abuse or use him in certain ways, and another narcissist he allowed into his life. And at least be able to make a decision in that moment. But then unfortunately he goes back and kind of starts seeing Andor, and that's the one outlet that he feels like he could actually do it. And I don't know if he hesitated as much with like not killing Andor, or if it's just the circumstances. I'd probably go watch it a few more times, but it leaves a lot to be discussed, I think, about whether or not he had it in him to actually end Andor, if Andor would have asked who he was.
I mean, yeah, we can talk about that, because the next really up is just kind of his death. He just had so much rage. I mean, for everything that we've just talked about, from realizing the Empire wasn't the people he thought they were, realizing that Dedra wasn't the person he thought she was, feeling the empathy and the sympathy for the Gormans and what they were going through, feeling lied to now, realizing that he's been lied to this entire time, that he wasn't privy to certain information, and everything else that went on leading up into that moment, to him putting his hands around her neck and backing off on that is still in him, right? All that rage is still in him. Then you bring in Andor, who's really just kind of the coup de grace for him in terms of like sending him over the edge. And he's just got so much rage. And that's why we have that really dynamic fight between both of them. And he's got, he's just letting it all out. It's all just primal rage coming out throughout that entire fight in ways that we've never even seen. Like you said, he's a desk jockey. I don't know that he's ever punched anybody in his life, and yet here he is, holding his own, because it's just, he's on pure adrenaline and hate. It feels like in that final moment when he's got the gun pointed at him, because of everything that just built up, it felt like he probably would have done it. Like he should have done it, given everything on, but he couldn't. He couldn't, because that's not who he was. Now, he might have had that quick moment of realization, like, holy crap, what have I become here? Right? I'm now just doing what they did. And I know it sounds cliche because it happens a lot. That's kind of my take on it. I think that's why he lowered the weapon. I couldn't find anything definitively that said, no one asked anybody like, Kyle or Tony Gilroy or anybody, like, would he have done it? Did he really put down his weapon? So I can definitely see both ways where it wasn't really, I can see both. I can see the arguments for and against whether or not he would have done it. I think in my head, he just put the gun down or lowered the weapon, realizing this wasn't going to go anywhere. Now, I don't think he was going to save him. I don't think he was going to reach out his hand and say, come on, buddy, let's go. We'll get out of this, me and you. Like, I'm not going there. I think he was probably just going to drop the weapon and just walk away from all of this, because it was just pure chaos and none of it was real. On top of all of that, to have him say, who are you? When he's like, all I've thought about is you for like the last 5 years or whatever it is.
Right.
I haven't known anything but you. I mean, you have been the whole reason I have existed. And you again, been that proverbial white whale, and just takes the steam out of it. It takes all the steam out of him. Like, that's just, it had to be very humbling, and probably the last straw for him.
That counterpoint from Luthen and Dedra, right? Like,
oh yeah.
Hardly seems fair.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But anyways, that's my take on, I guess, his death. I guess any thoughts around that? And then, I don't know. Do you feel sorry for his character? I know, how much sympathy did you have for him?
I think at the end of the day, you do feel kind of bad for him, because I think when you have that moment when the one thing you think you can go and do something about it, can control, and you've laid into him, you've done everything you can, you've got the upper hand, you've got him right there, dead to rights. There's no way out. Everything you've always wanted, and then for him to not even understand who you are, what significance you have, and that there was no satisfaction in that, and it just left him hollow and emptier than before. I think just that's when the moment you actually like feel bad for him in some way, of like, wow, he's having that moment where he realizes the last 5 years of his life have been a complete waste of time.
Yeah.
Because it's all been lies. It's all been deceit. It's all been for a purpose that he wasn't truly aware of and maybe agree with in many ways, in some ways at least. And it had all summarized, and he always put it back on this one person who has absolutely no idea who he is or what he's done to help put all of these events in motion. And that just rips your heart out. So I think you do kind of have him. It's a weird moment of where you feel bad for the bad guy character, because you just know all the decisions they made have just been so poor and now they mean zero and mean nothing. But at the same time, it's almost poetic justice to an extent that he has a very unceremonious death in that way, because that's what the character has always been in some way. Just another name on a sheet that's going to be forgotten at the end of the day. And that's sad, but also kind of fit for the character's purpose, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll say this a little bit later, but it's the line of eventually the monster will come for us all. right? The monster came from him, and that's how he met his death, unfortunately. But
Yeah.
all right, let's talk about Dedra Meero here just a little bit. I know we've been kind of talking about her throughout the episode now, but I was trying to, again, going back to kind of defining characteristics, traits, adjectives, that sort of thing. Would you say she's if the Empire is a cult, which you could have seen, there are videos out there that talk about this, and I was spending way too much time reading these or watching the videos, but in some ways she does feel like, I wouldn't say she's a cultist, but she definitely grew up in the system. You know what I mean? Like, she was definitely a part of the system. She knew how the system ran. I think that's why she was able to be successful, on top of her personal traits that got her there for sure. But she was indoctrinated into all of this stuff at a very young age, given that she was part of whatever it was, the preschool thing that everybody had a fit about because the math didn't add up for them. But she was fit to thrive in this environment, being power hungry, being very controlling, being very much a realist in some ways. Always feeling like she was right to a fault, always persistent to a fault. We see some of that manifest in season 2. I felt like I was rooting for her in season 1, just because of her her situation that fell apart quickly by the time we got to season 2.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, she was very much in favor of like order, in a lot of ways. And so there is an aspect of the Empire. I know we've talked about this many times on shows before, but the order that the Empire did bring, love it or hate it, was definitely there. And so all of that was really just kind of a mixer for her to kind of be successful in the Empire and get to where she got by the time we get to season 2.
Yeah, unfortunately, though, she's aware of all of the atrocities that the Empire is doing, and she's totally okay with it, right? So it's the other side of the coin for her of, yeah, you want to root for her to kind of be able to be successful and to kind of push and champion a way through here in season 1. But then when you start to see that, no, she's been brought into the loop on some of this stuff, and you kind of wonder the hesitation that she has with, oh gosh, what's his name? Krennic, right? When they're first talking about the Gorman and what needs to be done. Like, you can't tell if she just wants to be asked or if she's just hesitant to make a mistake, whatever it might be. But, she knows exactly what needs to happen, and they follow to a T, and she's given control to be able to do it, which is what she ultimately really wants. And I think she grew up in the system so much that she actually learned the one rule of the Empire is control at all costs. And she has no qualms about that. And you kind of feel bad for some characters like that in a way, because if they don't know any better, they can't act any different because they don't have any examples of why that's not okay, or what the actual effect of that is. And then you get to the other point, the other question that goes with that is, well, is it that they don't know, or is it that they don't care? Mm-hmm. And I think early on, it was more of a Dedra doesn't know type of thing. This is just how she's grown up and how she's lived. But when we get to the Gorman side of things, we're like, okay, no, she just really doesn't care.
She doesn't care. Right. Yeah.
She really is. She is the monster of the Empire as much as anybody else that's, progressing the agenda and what they're doing and the atrocities they're going to commit across galaxy. And, specifically Gorman and even Ferrex to an extent. But we were kind of hoping that Ferrex would scare a little of that life into her of getting her that question mark, right? And those were some of the questions we had leaving season 1 was, is she still has that conviction with the Empire? And if anything, it doubled down on it. And Syril, I think, was that component too of saying, look, no, we're right. And what we're doing is right. These insurrectionists are what's wrong, right? So have faith and have confidence. And she's right back on the horse and, and championing the way.
Yeah. Yeah. Her character is interesting because I don't know that we saw, I don't mean this in the bad way. I don't know that we saw a huge amount of development from her character, right? It felt like it was just more affirming, more confirming of who she was, right? And the more opportunities that she had, she took advantage of them and became even worse of a person in season 2. We were kind of on the fence, I think, like you said, teetering on whether or not she was good, bad, just misinformed, right, misled. But all that kind of got washed away. So even though her character didn't necessarily, develop in like really dynamic ways, it did mature is probably the better word for her character when we got to season 2. So seeing that maturation was enough for me. I think she's another character I felt like if we had gotten 5 seasons worth, we probably would have had moments in there where she had these small victories that were really starting to open the eyes to a lot of people to the Empire and starting to really kind of create a lot of dissent for people looking at her. I mean, we got the sense that, okay, she's been very successful. Some of her peers are now below her. Some of her peers don't really like her because she's either got too many victories or she's going around sniffing into things, and they think this is going to come down on her, and it doesn't. It actually just continues to propel her up the ladder, right? And then by the time we get to what happened with the Death Star plans and all that, that was really kind of, she maybe she went too far, right? A little too persistent, or really a little too confident in her abilities, and not feeling like, hey, I can go do this, and I can go take this upon myself and go down and visit and confront Luthen the way she did, because no one's going to do anything. I'm like the Golden Girl. I've done all these great things, but she stepped in too far, right? That was the one thing she really couldn't touch, was the Death Star, the plans, and the whole setup there, and of being accused. It feels like a fitting kind of, like, I totally understand why Krennic and everyone else came down hard on her the way they did. But I almost do feel like she was too much of like competition, or, they saw her as a threat to their success in the Empire, right? I don't know. There's pieces there that don't really line up, but at the same time, we got enough to kind of understand that that's, she got to that point. They wanted her out of there. She definitely stepped in something she probably shouldn't have stepped in, and she did go a little too far by just taking it upon herself to kind of confront Luthen the way he did. But I guess any thoughts around any of that, or the question's really more around, how did her character grow from season 1 to season 2?
Yeah, I think with the ISB in general, we hear this between Krennic and Partagaz when Mirt is there, right? Or Hirt, right?
Yeah.
Of like the ever-lengthening Imperial Death March, effectively, of the ISB.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's stuff going on, and then they're not staying in their lane, or they're not taking care of business. They're not doing the things that they're supposed to be doing. And I think that summarizes, Dedra in a nutshell of saying, while she was all for the order of the Empire, she couldn't stay in her lane. She couldn't let somebody else take over the Access project. She had to be the one. She was so invested. She was really obsessed by it in many ways, kind of like Syril was with his aspect of it. But she just couldn't let well enough be and just focus on the task at hand. And Partagaz was trying to coach her in that way. And like you said, when the Death Star comes in, this is the most critical project in the Empire. Everything hinges on this. This project must be successful because it is how the Empire will finally have the iron grip on the galaxy to be able to, scare everyone into submission where they have it, and be able to, quell these rebellions outright and universally without any kind of retaliation for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
So, but she fails to see that. Her own ambition keeps getting in the way of that, and then how she goes. And I think that's the part that I think the way you said it was maturation was a really good word, because I think we see that ambition continue to drive her, and that she's trying to, I need to win because this didn't go super well in Ferrix, but I can do all of this and I can really make an A for myself. And you see that confidence even in the hospital, right? Well, let's go get this cleared up when she's getting arrested.
Yeah.
It's like, no, honey, you're getting arrested. Like, right. They've had enough. Like, you're done. And there's no do-overs. There's no mulligans with the Empire. Once you're kind of done, you're done. And that Krennic pays a visit, it should tell you something right away. And you had said this during the show, that during that interview or interrogation, whatever you want to call it, we kind of get the feeling that she still thinks that, hey, there's a path here for us to leave this room together, go wrap this up. We're on the precipice. We're so close to be able to really finally pull the wraps on this thing, when she doesn't realize that her story has ended.
Yeah.
And that honestly, that she survived, which is going to, prison, was a bit of a surprise, because why didn't she get the same fate as like Partagaz in some way?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that speaks to, some things are death, or some things are, some fates are worse than death, right? That's kind of, I think, what it was. I've got some thoughts on that here in just a second.
True. Partagaz probably would have not, he might not have been in front of a firing squad, but he just went ahead and took care of things himself.
Yeah. Oh man, there was something else I was going to say that slipped my mind. All right, let's just talk about, I guess, confronting Axis. This is Luthen, that exchange. I mean, I know we've went on and on about how incredible that was, and they were both chomping at the bit, ready to kind of get that scene filmed. And I did, in part of the research, I found that that scene was actually written for the proof of concept to show that the progression of a span of 12 years over the course of one season or whatever, or 5 years, sorry, over the course of one season would work. They actually wrote that scene in there. That was one of the scenes that was pitched in that proof of concept that got the quick stamp of approval, rightfully so. And just another funny thing I also read too, they were talking about whether or not she would wear the hat when she confronted it. I think originally the script said that she would go there and she didn't have her hat on or whatever, right? They didn't call for it. And I guess the night before she went and filmed it, she was like, you know what? She would have her hat. Like, this is the moment she's been waiting for. Right. She's going to the big dance. This is going to be she wants to be dressed to the T in her full uniform just to show up there.
She's getting accommodation on the spot. She wants to be ready.
Yeah, exactly. And so she's going to look her best and feel her best. And so therefore she would wear the hat. And so I'm glad they did that, because I think it certainly is spot on for her character. I can't see her coming in, in casual clothing or even just partial uniform. It feels like she would be the kind of person that, again, because of the way she grew up in the system, that would be certainly appropriate for her character to show up. And I don't know, she didn't get her man. She maybe was a little too confident. I don't know why she wouldn't have thought.
She was smug. Yeah.
Yeah. She was a little smug, right? Never thought that somebody like Luthen would take his own life, even though that seems like it could be expected. I mean, they've gone through great lengths.
They don't understand the rebellion, right?
That's true. Yeah.
That's probably they don't understand what they are willing to, and I think Luthen in particular is willing to commit to all of this.
Right. Yeah, they don't understand the sacrifice. Oh, I remember the question, and this is trivial at best, but I was going to ask you, she had knowledge of the Death Star. She didn't say anything to anybody. Do you think she would have used that at some point? Do you think there was a risk there? I mean, we understand that Krennic felt it was a risk. I said there's probably some level of like, hey, we don't like you anymore. You're getting too powerful, or your competition. Maybe there's some of that bleeds into it, but I don't know. Do you think she would have done anything with it? Do you think she would have held it and used it for like leverage of some sort?
She had that data, I think they said like 1 or 2 years. So I'm guessing no. She was so consumed with access and everything else that was going on.
Yeah.
That there was no reason for her to focus on that. Because again, it wasn't really her interest. It wasn't her space. She didn't follow it super closely. If she was pouring through all the details, you were like, okay, she's doing something with it. And that's where Krennic is thinking like, how could you not have gone through this stuff?
Right,
like you see what this project is, you know what this means, right? Like, why would you not? And it's just, but it just shows you her obsession in one space, losing sight of the bigger picture and focusing just on what she wants.
Yeah. And I'm with you. Like, I don't think she would have done anything. Like, I mean, she probably felt empowered because she had that knowledge and, and felt like she's, even though she didn't get it the right way, she probably would have relished in that, the idea that she had it and knew something other people didn't. But I can't see her using that in any way. I think it was more about, if nothing else, just Krennic's paranoia about whether or not, who knew, right? This was the utmost secret project of all time for the Empire. And she was, a loose thread in some ways for them. Right?
Well, they were so close to the project being finished too. I think at that point that he knew that if anything happened right now, like I don't think he was in quite as risky a position as they blew it up to be, but you could feel that stress, I think, from Krennic. And we know all the backstory, right? So
exactly.
The challenges with Thrawn, the funding of it, Tarkin, the challenges there with him. We have the benefit of knowing all of that backstory and what we see in Rogue One a little bit later too. But so it adds additional layers as to why Krennic was so worked up about it. Because if you were to take it a step back at a 50,000 foot level, you're like, wait a minute, Krennic, like you're going to go blow up Jeddah here in a day or two. So what's the big deal? Like she's not going to, she's had it for 2 years. Why are you worried about it now when you're about ready to, to put the final cap on this thing quite literally? What's the actual problem? It's all that stress behind the scenes that's really doing it. But yeah, she would have had nothing. She really had nothing at that point. Because at that point in the Empire, they were like, yeah, here it is. What are you going to do about it?
I want to just quickly talk about Syril's death and the impact on her. Again, we don't benefit from knowing exactly how it impacted her immediately afterwards.
Did she actually know he died without question?
Well, so again, Denise did talk about this in an interview. She mentioned, they asked her like what, I think this was actually I think it might've been Molly's, interview, by the way, or Maggie, sorry, not Molly. Maggie Lovett's interview over at Collider. She had done an interview with Denise and asked her that question of like, what would that have been for her? And to kind of paraphrase, she said that Dedra's life kind of fell apart immediately after that. Does I have the quote here? She says, he's the only person who has ever seen Dedra Meero's vulnerable. There would have been a year of putting herself together after what she feels is a disaster. And I guess on all accounts, yeah, it was kind of a disaster. I mean, whether or not, I mean, she was well aware of it, and she probably felt bad because it all happened, but I didn't see a lot of remorse, of course, and I wouldn't have expected her to have a lot of remorse afterwards. But that's where, when she says things like that, again, it's not in the script. That's just her character talking, or the actress talking. It does kind of make me think, okay, well, maybe she wasn't as bad as she was, but I don't know. I'm still walking away from this thinking that, he was a means to an end, and the end happened, and she got her promotion, and, she was on to bigger and better things, primarily back on the hunt for Axis.
But it does give you that suspicion that she liked having the companionship. Like, she had been alone for so long, and
yeah, I think we talked about that in the show, right? Like, she didn't seem like the kind of character that was just, pulling guys left and right, or pulling people left and right. I mean, she just happened to have this one weirdo that was really into her, and she was like, okay, cool, finally,
Yeah, she didn't really know what to do with it, and it maybe stirred some feelings up there a little bit that were maybe latent, but it was something, I think, and so it's really important, I think, what Denise shared there, because afterwards, had they both survived, she definitely would have gone back to him, and like, it becomes a bit of a crutch, right? They both kind of fall into that pattern when it's really probably not healthy for that, but it's just something and someone for her to fall back on, and especially with the Empire kind of crumbling a little bit in that way, it would have been interesting to see where that would have gone, but yeah, interesting comment though.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't know all of that. All right, let's get to kind of her end. I guess her ending and really what happens to her. I mean, she obviously gets put in. It wasn't Narkina 5. I think they said it was either Narkina 2 or 7, because 5 was for the men. And so there would be another like whole system that was set up for just the women. She obviously gets thrown in jail. We get to see that one scene. Just another little trivia thing. I saw that when they finished filming season 1, Gilroy had talked to the set production people and said, hey, can you just save me one cell? I might need that later when we get to season 2. And so they tore down everything, destroyed everything but that one cell. And so they used that in that one shot. But I mean, that fate is kind of worse than death in a lot of ways, because you think about her character, she was all about controlling people. And now, again, this is like I said earlier, like the monster comes for us all. Even though she was the monster, there was a bigger monster, and always a bigger monster that came for her, because now she's been victimized by the monster. They threw her in jail. The fascism kind of thing wins every time. And she's left there now dehumanized in a lot of ways. She's completely stripped of all of her control. I think for her, that probably is a fate worse than death. I think in retrospect, she was probably thinking, I should have just done what Partagaz did, or, if she knew what he did, but it seems like that was much, much worse for her. And we can talk a little bit here too about whether or not you think she got out of there. Do you think that she lived on? And if she did, what happens? Let's just say theoretically, hypothetically, if she was to get out of prison, where would she have gone? What would she have done?
Well, I think one point is, I think you're around the money. Her fate, a fate worse than death for her would be irrelevance, right? I think that's part of it. But if she were to,
she's just like everybody else too. Sorry, just the whitewashing there of everything.
Right. So if she serves her term, or maybe the New Republic comes in and they release certain prisoners, although she would be clearly a prisoner of war anyway. But if she got out, I really don't know what she would do. Like, I don't know that she knows what she would do either, because I don't really see her turning over a new leaf and becoming a farmer or something like that, right? So I really don't know. I mean, clearly she's smart and driven, but what will drive her at this point? Is it to rebuild some sort of order? Is she going to be one of these kind of imperial remnant areas that try to build their own ideological aspect of what the Empire should have been? If Palpatine and his minions wouldn't have screwed it all up, or if the Moffs wouldn't have screwed it up, or whatever it might be, you could kind of see her as that, like that zealot type of personality comes out, to where she starts to build some sort of faction. We saw this in the Battle of Jakku comic with that character, whatever his name was, that we didn't really care for, but
right.
That's why I don't remember it. But it kind of reminded maybe a fate like that character, where he was pushing forward with his own agenda. It was at odds with the rest of what the Empire was doing, with the Remnant Empire that they were doing. So you could see maybe a path like that is that a little too on the nose for the character? I mean, absolutely. But we don't know anything else about her. So I don't know what else we would be able to infer from that. But you're the man with a million ideas, though. So I'm sure you've got a few.
Oh, yeah. So here's the timeline for what happens in the next 5 to 10 years after she comes out.
All right. I'm ready.
No, I'm kidding. I don't have that. But I yeah, it's hard to say because there's been a lot. There's like all these analysis that have been done on the tribe versus the gang, right? What's the difference between a tribe and a gang? Well, the tribes are always trying to help each other out. They're for the better of each other. Whereas the gang looks like they have power. They look very similar to the gang, right? They dress nicely. I think of the Nihil, especially when I talk about this. But at the end of the day, the gang is always going to betray you, right? They're going to turn on you and roll you out, whereas a tribe would always try to take care of you. Similarly, you've got the Empire here who did some really horrible things to a lot of people. She was privy to it all. She abated a lot of that, she was an enabler in a lot of ways. But I can see her coming out of prison and saying, well, that's not really the Empire that I knew, right? Yeah. They were, like you said, those people were kind of crazy. They were skewed. They were the fanaticals. And that's not really what the Empire should have been, right? And I can see her maybe trying to come back to certain aspects or pockets of the Empire, or maybe just saying, I'm done with these guys. And, and later on, when the First Order comes to power, maybe she's a revivalist there. Like, oh God, this is exactly what the Empire was supposed to be. And maybe join sides there. I mean, I think that's all possible. I don't know that she would have made it out of prison. I think she probably just threw herself down on the floor at night, right? To kind of just take her own life at some point. I don't know that she could have lived and survived. I mean, I guess it really just depends on how long she was in jail, but I can see her just slamming her body down on the floor and just taking her life from the shock thing that kills you too. So
let me ask you another question. Do you think that Thrawn would recruit someone like Dedra Meero?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I think so. Well, do you?
I mean, yeah, I think she has enough of that motivation and competency to be able to do it. I think, and it would be interesting to see if Thrawn could shape some of that ambition out of her. I think he respects ambition to a certain point, but
right.
you can't be a loose cannon. You can't be unpredictable in Thrawn's shop. So what would that take to be able to build that confidence? But yeah, I think that she would probably align herself with Thrawn, I think, in that way too, because I think he's a bit more of the epitome of what the Empire could be with a disciplined approach as well.
Yeah. I hate to say like a traditionalist when it comes to the Empire, but yeah, I mean, it kind of feels appropriate. And I think Thrawn fits into that.
Doesn't have all the pettiness that went with the Empire.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I was thinking of, what's his name? I can't think of his name now, from Empire. The one that rose through the ranks. It's not Hydra, or it's forget it. There are other examples of Empire people within the Empire that rose to the ranks that didn't have a lot of that pettiness kind of and stuff, the drama that came with it, which is good. But one up had a question. He says, "Do you think they moved her to a cell on the Death Star?" That would be fitting and horrible, like ironic in a lot of ways.
Yeah, since Krennic doesn't survive, Krennic would have never allowed her to set foot on his space station, but without him being around, who knows?
Yeah. That would be funny though, if she did end up there. Yeah. So, but overall, I guess let's just kind of wrap it up. I mean, her character, all these characters, I mean, we've said this already, but so many of these characters from Andor are going to be characters we'll be talking about a lot. There's certainly going to be archetypes for other characters that will spawn ideas, and other shows, whether they're Star Wars or not, will be, they'll look back on these characters and create spin-offs of them and variations of them. But all that's a tribute to, again, the writing and certainly the performances by the actors. It was really good though, just to have a character in the Empire like her for the first time. Like, I don't know that we've had anybody, well, certainly not anybody on screen that was like this, but just to kind of get that inside look into the ISB, what it meant to work their way through the ranks, all the relationships, the dynamics of all the different in canon to some extent, but really to see it at the forefront in a series like this, as powerful and dramatic as it was just a really great experience, and very thankful for both of these guys for what they did.
Yeah, it's interesting as each of the characters is kind of written like a tragedy. And I think every character in Andor, to an extent, or all the main characters have
and
kind of this tragedy type of arc. What's that?
Oh, I said, and Rogue One. I mean, that's,
Well, I mean, Andor, you kind of get a little bit, like he's sacrificing everything, even though he has a child now and the relationship with Bixby. Then, you get the payoff of the true tragedy by the end of Rogue One. But I think everybody kind of has it in their own way.
Yeah.
And I think it even extends to the villains, right? It extends to Syril Karn. It extends to Dedra Meero, even to Partagaz and Krennic in some ways, right? If they kind of see the faults of their ways, or they see the gaps, and they see all the things that kind of went awry, or maybe they just overlooked and just kept doubling down on, and it doesn't work out for them in the end. And maybe they have a moment. I mean, Partagaz would be interesting to hear what if he left a note, type of thing, right? And him listening to Nemik's manifesto, those types of things are always really interesting. But with Syril and Dedra, you see it more firsthand, I think, especially for Syril, of just those moments of regret. And with Dedra, you're really not sure what we're left thinking about with her. You see she's crying in the disappointment and the anger and the fear, but is it really regret or not? I think that's the interesting thing part about that character, is that we just don't. She doesn't really come across as a regretful person in any kind of way. So does that shift at all after this experience? And I think that's what makes these characters really, again, really well drawn and well done. And like you said, even though they don't have these huge overarching, achievements throughout their career or whatever, or their emotional journeys, or a moment of enlightenment or whatever, I've said this for a long time. Sometimes we just want our villains to be villains.
Yeah.
And it's okay for them to have complexity, but we still want them to kind of be the bad guy, even though we're still left debating, like with Syril and Dedra. Are there aspects of where they had moments that are like, I really am on the wrong side, or, hey, we really have done some bad things and it's not okay. Do they have it? No, I think with Dedra's case, probably not, but Syril, he may have had that moment. And I think that's what makes these characters interesting to talk to, even several months after the show's been, finished. So,
yeah. This series definitely had characters that were kind of all over the spectrum of morality, right? Which is good. You don't want everybody to be morally conflicted throughout, or, the anti-hero that, has a, you know what I'm saying? Like it was nice to have them all kind of all over the place on there, but
yeah. And when they wear it on their sleeve that they're the hero of their own story, it gives you that confidence of saying, okay, I'm okay with liking this bad guy for these reasons, or seeing through some of all of the facade too. So I think those are the aspects that really brings a lot of joy when we're viewers of the series and then talking about it afterwards, of course.
Hey, you know who brings us a lot of joy?
Yeah, every single week are our amazing people on the live stream and our Patreon members, of course. So thanks to the folks who came on the live stream today. Alex, one of our CPU, Steph, Music Train, the people in the background, we saw you out there too. We appreciate you stopping by. We hope you'll join us if you're listening to this. Thanks for the download. If you'd like to come out and join the live stream, ktinacast.com/YouTube. You can like and subscribe to our videos if you would feel so inclined. See all of our amazing content out there. Make sure you ring the bell so that you get notified when we're going to be live. And also that you're going to get those amazing videos from Lauren on all the book covers that she's doing, and has more to come on John Jedi Novel Archive. So check out that playlist. And again, special thanks to all of our Patreon members as well as our YouTube members as well. ktinacast.com/Patreon if you are curious about any of that exclusive content.
Yep. And again, just a reminder, we'll be back I won't be back, but Sunday, Jonesy will be back along with Lauren to kind of break down The Witness, which is a short story from a certain point of view. Yeah. I said that right. Every time I say that, because we've
indoctrinated ourselves into doing that.
Right, yeah. And then we'll be back next Wednesday for the Mon Mothma Spotlight. So that'll be a lot of fun. Lots to talk about with her character and everything that happened with her. So looking forward to that as well. All right. Jonesy, any final words, anything else before we get out of here?
Well, thanks, everyone. Good night.
Yeah, thanks, everybody, for joining, and we'll see you guys here on the next episode.
You're still listening? Wow. That's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good, fun stuff. But I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what. So that's your disclaimer.